Hello, welcome back to Practical Research 2. How are you today? Okay, so we are going to continue with another topic, which is kinds of variables and their uses. So I hope you guys are doing well and fine. And if you have questions later on, you just have to send a private message in Messenger. Okay? So, what do you mean by variable? So, variable, just wait, refers to characteristics that has two or more mutually exclusive values or properties. Examples of variables include sex, either male or female, age, size, height, weight, and income. So when you say variable, it refers to characteristics or attribute of an individual or an organization that can be measured or observed and that varies among the people or organization being studied. So when you think of variables, those are characteristics in your research subject. Like for example, the age, the sex, whether male or female, things like that, or the income, if you consider that. Then if you're going to consider also academic performance, and make sure that your variables can be measured or observed and in an objective manner. Okay, so that is what we call variable. And variable is very important in research. So let's go to the types of variables. This is by Alan Titsworth Hunt, 2009. So when we say types of variables, we are going to talk about continuous variables. It is a variable that can take infinite number on the value that can occur within the population. Its values can be divided into fractions. Examples of this type of variable include age, height, weight, time, and temperature. Continuous variables can be further categorized as there's a continuation to that, but let's just talk about continuous variables. So when you say continuous variables, that means you can divide the value or the number. So there's a you can add some point something like that. We're going to continue on with the next. Okay, so the first type of continuous variable is internal variables. So when you say internal variables, it is a measurement where the difference between two values have meaning. So like for example, in our example here, 60 degrees and 50 degrees, it is the same as difference between 30 degrees and 20 degrees, because the interval between 60 and 50, if you're going to the difference between the two values, 60 minus 50 is equal to 10. The same with 30 degrees and 20 different minus 20 degrees, so that gives us 10 degrees. So the interval between values makes sense and can be interpreted. So that's when we say interval, so the difference between two values, you have to remember that. Okay, next is ratio variable. This is another type of continuous variable, and it has values that lie along an evenly dispersed range of numbers when there is absolutely or meaningful zero. It possesses the properties of interval variable and has a clear definition of zero, indication that there is none of that variable, examples of which are height, weight, and distance. Most scores stemming from response to survey items are ratio level values because they typically cannot go below zero. So Celsius and degrees Fahrenheit is not a ratio variable because zero under these temperature scales does not mean no temperature at all. So when you say ratio, like for example, one teacher is equivalent to 45 students. So that's a ratio, right? So that's just an example. Like for example, 1 cup of rice, the ratio should be 1 cup of water also. So that's when you are going to think about ratio variables, you have to think that there is absolute or meaningful zero. Okay, next, another is discrete variables. So we started with continuous, and under continuous we have the interval variables and ratio variables. Then another type of variable is discrete variable. So when you say discrete, meaning to say categorical or classificatory variable. So this is any variable that has limited number of distinct values which cannot be divided into fractions, like sex, blood group, and number of children in family. Discrete, there are also other categories of discrete variables. So when you say discrete variable, that means you cannot divide the variable in the number of children in your family. Like for example, you cannot divide your children, or the number of children, right? I mean, your children, you cannot divide each of the children. And then the sex, you cannot divide the sex, the blood group. So that means when you say discrete, it is limited number of distinct values. Okay, then under discrete variables are the following. Let's start with nominal. So when we say nominal, categories that cannot be ordered in any particular way. There is no order in the variable. It is a variable with no quantitative value, and it has 2 or more categories but does not imply ordering of cases. So when you say nominal, it's just like description of the variables, like eye color. You cannot order them, business type, religion. There is no quantitative value on them in which you can order them from highest to lowest, from greater to lesser, something like that. Then religion, biological sex, political affiliation, basketball fan affiliation, a subtype of nominal scale with only two categories, just like sex, is known as dichotomous. Next is ordinal. So from the word order, ordinal. So the categories can be ordered from greatest to smallest. That means there is a quantitative value. So for example, the income levels of low, middle, and high can be considered ordinal, because if, like for example, your research subject, you're going to consider their income, but of course you have to think of the quantity, the number. So you will know that these subjects belong to low level income, and then the others to high or middle income. Okay, kinds of variables. So the types of variables that we have earlier were continuous and discrete variables, and under continuous variable we have ratio and interval variable, and under discrete we have nominal and ordinal variables. So let's go to the bigger kinds of variables. First one is independent variables. So when you say independent, you have to think that when you say when you say independent variables, they are called treatment, manipulated, antecedent, or predictor variables. They are not a variable or is not affected by anything that you, the researcher, does. So in the cause-effect relationship, the independent variable, they are the cause. Okay? And then there's an example here. A study is on the relationship of study habits and academic performance of UTNH's senior high school students. So what is our independent variable there? So the independent variable is the outcome or the performance of the students. Okay, let me correct myself. So in this example, study habits is the independent variables because it influences the outcome or the performance of the students. I hope that you understand me so far. Then next is dependent variables. Those that depend on the independent variables, they are the outcomes. So earlier we have the independent variable, which is the cause, and the dependent variable is the outcomes or results of the influence of the independent variable. So in our example, a study is in the relationship of study habits of academic performance of UTNH as senior high school students. So academic performance is the dependent variable. Okay, so in a cause-effect relationship, you have to remember that the dependent variable is the effect and the independent variable is the cause. Okay, in the cause and effect relationship. But yeah, if it's the that's it. Okay, then intervening or meddling variables, lacking D. Variables that stand between, middle, the pakialamera variables. The independent and dependent variables, they show the effects of the independent variable and the dependent variable. So let's consider the example. So even if farm production, that's the dependent variable, is good, if the attitude towards payment, that's the intervening variable, is negative, loan repayment would be low. Whereas if the attitude towards repayment is positive or favorable, loan repayment would be high. So I hope that you understand the example. And the farm production is a dependent variable, and we are after the loan repayment. And the attitude towards the payment, that is the intervening, the meddling variable, the stand in between the dependent and the independent variables. Okay, then control variables, a factor in an experiment which must be held constant. For example, an experiment to determine whether light makes plants grow faster, you would have to control for soil quality and water. So there is something that you control in an experiment. In the experimental research, you should have control variables that you control in order to come up with the results that you're looking for. Then confounding variables, extra variables that have hidden effect on your experimental results. So these are just extra variables. Alright, so we're done. Now let's go to the activity. So what you're going to do is you're going to identify the variables and the constant in each title of study presented. Determine the independent and dependent variable, then determine whether discrete or continuous variable. So for example, a study on the relationship of study habits and academic performance of teenage senior high school students. So what is our constant is teenage senior high school students. Our independent variable there, what is our independent variable? So our independent variable is the study habits, and the discrete variable is also the okay. So what you're gonna do is here is study habit, and then discrete or continuous, it is discrete because it can be divided. The study habits, you can measure it, and then the dependent variable is the academic performance, it's still discrete. So in the remaining activity or the remaining tables, I want you to do it on your own. So there's a title here at the top, and then you're going to put the constant. What is the constant? And then the independent in here, and then the discrete. You're going to identify whether it is discrete or continuous, and then the dependent, whether discrete or continuous. Okay, if you have questions, just send me a PM. Alright, so I hope you guys that you will be safe, and if you have questions, just send me a message though, and PM also. Thank you so much and keep safe.